A seismic tremor is shaking the foundations of global geopolitics, quietly yet unmistakably. In a move that could alter the very fabric of international power, Saudi Arabia, the undisputed titan of oil, has just made a choice that may end an era. It has accepted China's offer, an offer not merely economic in nature, but deeply strategic and potentially historic. Is this the beginning of the end for U.S. dominance in the Middle East? Is the global balance of power tilting before our eyes, and how will the West respond to this defiant pivot? For nearly 5 decades, the unshakable bond between the United States and Saudi Arabia has served as one of the core pillars of the post-war global order. Born from the 1970s petrodollar agreement, this alliance didn't just secure oil, it secured dominance. Oil was to be sold exclusively in US dollars, anchoring the greenback as the world's reserve currency and with it, America's unrivaled leverage over global finance. In return, Saudi Arabia received the full weight of American security guarantees, state-of-the-art military hardware, and preferential access to the world's largest economy. It was a marriage of necessity and power, but something has shifted. Under the leadership of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the kingdom is breaking the mold. Vision 2030, his bold roadmap for the future, demands economic transformation, foreign investment, technological reinvention, and less dependence on oil. To achieve this, Saudi Arabia is looking eastward toward a partner who does not lecture, who does not impose conditions, who brings capital, technology, and ambition in equal measure. That partner is China, now Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner. China imports over $60 billion in Saudi oil annually. But this isn't just about barrels. This is about the tectonic alignment of two powers who see mutual opportunity in a world sliding toward multipolarity. The Belt and Road Initiative, President Xi Jinping's sweeping blueprint for global connectivity, is the scaffolding of this new relationship, and Saudi Arabia, sitting at the crossroads of 3 continents with the treasure trove of energy, is essential to its success. What's unfolding isn't a simple trade deal. It's a recalibration of the world order. China is not just offering to buy oil, it is proposing to buy it in yuan, a direct challenge to dollar supremacy. Should Saudi Arabia embrace this shift, the petrodollar, the very mechanism that has underpinned U.S. financial dominance for decades, begins to unravel. A yuan-denominated oil market would signal to the world that the dollar is no longer the only game in town. It would reshape currency markets, redirect investment flows, and redefine the rules of international finance, but China's offer goes deeper than currency. It's a full-spectrum partnership, economic, technological, and military. Advanced drones, AI surveillance systems, and potential joint missile development are all on the table. Unlike the West, Beijing provides this technology without political strings, and that appeals to a kingdom increasingly wary of U.S. interference and eager to carve out strategic autonomy. Even more symbolic is China's investment in NEOM, the $500 billion futuristic city rising from the Saudi desert. Designed to be a beacon of innovation, sustainability, and post-oil prosperity, NEOM is the centerpiece of Vision 2030. With China's money, tech, and logistical might behind it, NEOM becomes more than a dream. It becomes a geopolitical statement. This isn't just diversification, it's a declaration. Saudi Arabia is signaling that it no longer wishes to be anyone's client state. It is crafting its own path, one that balances between the old hegemon and the new contender. In Washington, alarm bells are ringing. A core strategic partner is drifting, perhaps irreversibly, into Beijing's sphere of influence. There's talk of sanctions, but that could backfire, accelerating the very shift the U.S. seeks to prevent. With over 2,500 troops stationed on Saudi soil and billions invested in arms deals, America's presence is deeply entrenched. But how long can that last if mutual interests begin to fray? About Donald Trump's unjustified tariffs on Canada, this is an attack on our country and on British Columbia families that will not go unanswered. The tension between the United States and Canada has reached a boiling point, with British Columbia Premier David Eby taking aggressive action against the U.S. in response to President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods. The latest move proposes tolls on commercial trucks traveling from the continental U.S. to Alaska through British Columbia. This bold strategy targets Alaska's reliance on Canadian infrastructure, turning geography into a weapon in an escalating trade war. Alaska, though legally part of the United States, is physically isolated from the lower 48. There are no direct roads, railways, or pipelines connecting it to the mainland without crossing Canadian territory. Every shipment of groceries, fuel, or construction materials must pass through British Columbia and the Yukon, making Alaska uniquely vulnerable to Canadian policy shifts. Premier Eby's proposal to impose tolls on these shipments is not just a retaliatory measure, it's a calculated strike at a critical pressure point. The tolls would raise shipping costs by thousands of dollars per load, costs that would inevitably be passed on to Alaskan consumers already burdened with some of the highest living expenses in North America. The Alaska Highway, a 1,387-mile lifeline built during World War II, is at the center of the dispute. A 1977 treaty between the U.S. and Canada explicitly prohibits tolls on this route, but Eby is testing the limits of that agreement. Trump has responded with fury, calling the move illegal and vowing retaliation. Behind the scenes, White House advisors are preparing legal countermeasures, including freezing infrastructure funds and reviewing cross-border treaties. The situation has devolved into a high-stakes game of chicken, with neither side willing to back down. For Alaska, the consequences are dire. The state's economy depends on seamless access through Canada, and any disruption could lead to shortages of essential goods. Remote towns like Haydider, which rely entirely on Canadian roads for access, would be hit hardest. Residents are already stockpiling supplies, fearing the worst. The tolls are framed as temporary, but industry analysts warn they could become permanent if the trade war intensifies. The conflict has also spilled into maritime routes. Most ships bound for Alaska travel through Canadian waters, particularly the Inside Passage, a protected network of channels that cruise liners and cargo vessels rely on for safe travel. If Canada were to restrict access or impose new fees, shipping costs would skyrocket, and tourism, a vital sector for Alaska, would suffer. Even air travel is at risk, as flights from the lower 48 to Alaska often depend on Canadian airspace. Denying overflight rights would force airlines to take longer, costlier routes, disrupting both passenger travel and cargo shipments. The standoff is more than a trade dispute, it's a clash of national pride. Trump has framed the issue as a matter of American sovereignty, while Eby has positioned himself as a defender of Canadian interests. The rhetoric has grown increasingly personal, with Trump dismissing Eby as a weak provincial bureaucrat and Eby firing back with declarations of defiance. The longer the stalemate continues, the harder it becomes to find a diplomatic solution. Border communities caught in the middle are pleading for de-escalation. Mayors of towns like Skagway and Haines have sent joint letters to both governments warning of the economic devastation that further retaliation would bring, but their voices are being drowned out by the larger geopolitical struggle. For now, Alaska's fate hangs in the balance, dependent on a web of routes that Canada could tighten or sever at any moment. The broader implications are equally troubling. If Canada succeeds in using Alaska as leverage, it could embolden other provinces to take similar actions, further straining U.S.-Canada relations. Meanwhile, Trump's hardline approach risks alienating a key ally and destabilizing North American trade networks. The Alaska highway crisis is no longer just about tariffs or tolls, it's a test of how far both nations are willing to go in a battle where geography, pride, and power collide. As winter approaches, the urgency grows. Alaska's isolation makes it uniquely vulnerable, and the world may soon be forced to rethink its military posture. It must seek new alliances and accept a world where its influence no longer goes unchallenged. This isn't just about oil or money, it's about power, who holds it, who shares it, and who dares to let it go. A new chapter begins. The old alliances are fading, new powers are rising, and history is being rewritten. Stay tuned, because the world you thought you knew may never look the same again. The United States finds itself at a crossroads, locked in a high-stakes geopolitical game where every move could alter the balance of global power. In the heart of a rapidly shifting Middle East, Washington must walk a razor-thin line, striving to protect its long-standing strategic interests without provoking instability or driving a key ally, Saudi Arabia, into the waiting arms of China. The stakes are immense. As Riyadh signals a pivot toward Beijing, the U.S. scrambles to reinforce its ties with other Gulf nations like the UAE and Qatar, countries that for now remain more closely aligned with American foreign policy. This quiet diversification is a calculated gamble, an effort to cushion the blow if the historic bond with Saudi Arabia begins to fracture, but this is no ordinary diplomatic balancing act. The Middle East remains a linchpin for global energy markets, and the U.S., despite its push for energy independence, cannot afford to overlook the region's influence on oil supplies. The way Washington chooses to respond to Riyadh's maneuvering sends ripples far beyond the Gulf. Every ally and rival is watching closely. A misstep here could shatter America's credibility, eroding its influence and unleashing consequences that echo across the global stage. At the heart of this geopolitical storm lies a far deeper threat, one that could rewrite the rules of the global economic order. If Saudi Arabia begins conducting oil transactions in Chinese yuan, the ripple effects could be seismic. Such a move would not only challenge the US dollar's status as the world's reserve currency, but it could open the floodgates for other OPEC nations to follow suit. What was once unthinkable, the decline of the dollar's dominance, suddenly seems possible. And with it, the pillars of American economic power begin to tremble. The implications are staggering. A weakened dollar could unleash volatility across global markets, disrupt investment flows, and prompt nations to diversify their currency holdings. Oil prices could soar past $100 per barrel, igniting inflationary pressure worldwide. For nations dependent on oil imports, this would be a crushing blow, driving up household costs, deepening inequality, and sparking unrest. The shockwaves wouldn't stop at the economy. They'd reach into the political realm, shaking governments, testing alliances, and accelerating a shift toward a more fragmented, competitive, and volatile world order. Meanwhile, China's rise gathers momentum. Backed by Saudi Arabia and a growing list of partners willing to trade in yuan, Beijing could spearhead the formation of a new multipolar financial system. This isn't just an economic evolution, it's a potential revolution, one that challenges the supremacy of the dollar, redraws the contours of global finance, and realigns power centers across continents. Trade, investment, energy, and influence could all flow in new, unpredictable directions. The old rules are fading, and a new era is knocking at the door. Against this backdrop, the U.S. Saudi-China triangle becomes the stage for a high-stakes drama with no clear script. Several futures are possible, and each carries profound consequences. In one scenario, Saudi Arabia plays both sides, leveraging its unique position to extract concessions and maintain autonomy, a delicate tightrope act that could foster a more multipolar world where middle powers wield outsized influence. In another, Washington might double down, taking a hardline stance against China's encroachment through sanctions, diplomacy, even military posturing, risking a new Cold War dynamic in the very heart of the Middle East. The prospect of military conflict, though distant, cannot be ignored. The region's strategic importance makes it a tinderbox.